Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me.
No, thank you, Maya, for and Jeff and this wonderful institution for the invitation. It is quite an honor to be here.
Same for us. Thank you. So I'm wondering, can we start with talking about what are your earliest memories of weaving?
What is the earliest memory of weaving? My earliest memory, not so much as a weaving itself, but the process. It's as a young boy, I used to help out with different aspects like sorting out the skeins or making the skeins, making bobbins for my parents and my older siblings, and finishing up grooming or cleaning the finished pieces.
And where was that taking place?
That is in the community, in my community in Teotitlán del Valle. I don't have much memories of weaving itself, except one that it's predominantly in my spirit as a creative is creating one piece where I was allowed to be creative and where I make all the decisions of color, design, dimensions, and the rest. I don't have much more memory of creating work because I grew up in standardized craft tradition, much more commercialized understanding of making textiles.
Okay. So I would definitely want to talk more about the materials that you grew up using and the materials you're using now. But before we get into that, would you like to talk a little bit about that background and lineage and how you arrived at your current iteration of work?
It is for me. It is really important to understand to understand my identity, to understand the reality of the creative process, but also the reality of communities, how there many times communities are oppressed by outside force in terms of production, in terms of what it's made, what it's not made, the repetitiveness and the cheapness of the goods. A historical understanding about, yes, the sacredness of the material, where the material comes from, how to transform nature into color effectively, the meaning of color, the sacredness of the textiles themselves that are used in ceremonies, but also in everyday use, the structure of the weave itself, but also the designs, the symbolism, and especially the designs, geometric designs that are found in important today known as archaeological sites such as Mitla, Yahul, Monte Albán, and others. So it is a great analysis of these different topics and these different inspiration and this information has allowed me to, along with migration, diaspora, and traumas and celebrations of this journey, being an immigrant and life in more modern America. So this is, for me, has allowed me to create an analysis into be able to create work that free up my soul and deepens within the information, especially in the design aspect of my work.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell me a little bit more about your current design process and how you're reimagining traditional Zapotec forms?
So the actual process of designing, I work with pen and pencil, graph paper, for the simplest form of making something or drawing. I'm sorry, in this case, I use just a graph paper, and so I'm always sketching, creating designs, and so then from there, then it goes to a digital format. To be able to understand composition, to be able to understand the colors, the choose of materials, and This helps me bring it into a digital format. Also helps me deepen my view into the piece, color, material, and dimension. As far as design, being an inherent or being a descendant of the Zapotec nation or people, there is just tremendous amount of rich information and abstract, if you may, minimalism that you see around. And this is something that I grew up around. But since sometimes when you are part of such a rich culture, but also when that culture has been modified into conform standardized craft tradition, it is really hard to be able to bring your sensibility into appreciating the pure of the element themselves. And those are some of the things that I had to relearn and look at the same forms as my ancestors looked or my ancestors made. The geometric design, the cycle of life, the butterflies themselves, designs that are found on the archaeological site. For me, I'm really drawn by the movement of them, by the scale, the movement, but also the movement of the structure, because a lot of these structure, or maybe all of them, has a role, not only a role of either protecting or a role either ceremony, a role in the environment, in the celestial, and the sacredness, and the connection to the cosmos, the sun, the moon, how the light communicates these spaces. And so those are some of the things that I had to relearn or learn into be able to transform these images that I'm looking at, when images or physical spaces, and transform them into an actual design. And so these are some of the observation I do regularly, and to bring them to life. Much of it is driven by having an opportunity to mark or take note or an analysis of current situation. And so my work is then comes to life through these subjects.
I think we can definitely see the role of nature in your work. And another big form of that is definitely color, right? So you're known for working with cochineal and the color that produces carmine. And I'm wondering if you would talk about how you grow your cochineal and harvest it and that whole process.
The growing of cochineal insect, there is a couple different ways. The techniques that I use, and by the way, I farm a very small amount, and I'll explain more. But it is harvesting the cactus, prickly pear cactus, and which is ideally food for the insects. Clean them, make a hole in this case to be able to hang them on a string on a rack, and so you have to wait for that to heal. After it's been healed, then by then the insects have already giving birth, and so you harvest those, and as you're harvesting, obviously the mother and the baby are being harvested at the same time, right? As they're giving birth at the same time, and then from there the babies gets to be filtered in a mesh to be placed in or on the petals of the prickly pear petals, and so then that will be infesting the cactus, and so then from there then it goes, then it hangs in a rack, and their life cycle, it's around 4 months, and so that is just the beginning of creating color.
Wow. Okay. So then you're taking these what were once live insects and how do you turn that into a pigment?
Well, to give a little bit more emphasis on the process itself, it takes around 1,200 of leaves of prickly pear cactus to produce 2 pounds or 1 kilo. And it takes about 60 to 70,000 insects to make 1 pound of that, 1 pound of dye stuff. To produce this much, you can imagine how much labor intensive, how many people are involved in to be able to create this much, which is in reality, it's not a lot when you think about 1,200 leaves of prickly pear cactus for 1 kilo of dye stuff. And so that is, again, the beginning of just to be able to have the raw material. And now to transform the raw material into color, there has to be an understanding around science, chemistry, in my case, around understanding that nature is alive, the sacredness of the water and the effects of water in color, but also the effect of climate itself in the color, how the sun affects the color, and which part of the mountains certain elements are greater than others, or which side of the mountains a certain element, its abundance. And that's where you get to know nature in such a very deep and harmony way.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other dye plants that you're currently working with?
I work with marush, with nogal, of course, indigo feraso fructicosa, which is native to the Americas. I work with pericon, lichen, about 10, 12 elements, all that conforms or that are driven within ancestral practice or tradition, or some of them are a much more newer development relationship with these plants, and to be able to create around 200 colors that I have been able to catalog up until today.
Wow, that's fabulous. So you talked a little bit about some of the spiritual aspects of working with natural dyes. Can I hear a little bit more about that?
Since a very young age, I came to understand that not any day or any time you could harvest a plant, and not any day or any time a healing process could be performed. And this is through my mother's medicine practice, by helping her or sending us to collect certain plants for her healing practice. And so just by being around in my opinion, the last generation that holds such a deep view and a spiritual dimension to the ancestors, which is that layer of generation that my parents are part of, which the majority did not, or well, the majority only, not only, but the majority kept the integrity of the ancestral knowledge, and did not had the exposure to a Western school. And so from a young age, my parents would tell us that plants were alive just like us. You'll never see a kernel on the floor. There was such a deep respect and reverence to the land, to the food themselves, because this was also around the time where a lot of changes was happening, where we had barely started or begun to be introduced to the global economy. But before then, money wasn't really a need as it is today. So the land was completely reverence to the land itself, and the wealth was measured by the crop and the land itself. And so the sacredness of the food, it's embedded within the sacredness of the rest of the elements, in this case through my mother's traditional medicine, or the other plants that you might need to make room to make stirring sticks for the beams at your house. And so I became to understand that I was an extension of nature, and the reverence that I saw and I see my parents towards nature even today. Those are some of the deep and integrity of my life as human, but also as an artist.
Thank you. So would you say that some of the natural dyes that you work with, some of those plants are also medicinal?
In cultural tradition around the world, that's extremely common. It's the overlap of medicine and arts and food. It's present on these cultures, I believe, around the world.
Okay. I know that we've talked a little bit about your work as craft, but I'm interested in hearing, how do you see your work as craft and as art? And what do you feel, or how do you feel weaving sits sort of in the contemporary art world?
Yeah, these kind of subjects are obviously quite difficult to sometimes have, and because these overlapping, but also these separation of crafts and fine arts and conception, all these titles and encapsulation. In our language, I speak Zapotec today, and I'm not aware if historical, but I know today that there isn't a word to refer to an artist. So we don't have a word for artist. The closest would be Venana. Venana is someone that has wisdom. And so, but I also understand your question. And for me, as a craft person or tradition, it's more of the skill of making something. But maybe my reference can only, it's very vague, because I grew up in the standardized tradition, as I mentioned earlier. And so for me, that's craft, but I was not allowed to be creative. And so it's the skill that you might have, where I was able to break from that into be able to create work that it's now welcomed by institutions that maybe normally does not engage with craft traditions. And so, which I guess you could say that makes me weaver, dyer, craftsperson, artist, fine artist, conceptual artist. And so for me, that's extremely beautiful to be able to expand on the conversation, because that also inform how indigenous people are communicating today in the environment, but also that informs that traditions like mine and people, we're still alive and we're still here. And so it's not a reference to just the historical people or what they've done. It's a reference to today's. And so those are some of the engagement that I have been having. And also, I consider myself as a case study, because my school comes from at least 10,000 years of history and physical evidence of creative and artists and a lineage that I come from. But I also come in a culture where our certification is not given to artists. And so I don't have a certification for me to say which art school I studied. And so this natural evolvement, or this natural understanding of the arts, the culture, the DNA information that runs through me and my ancestors, my parents, and so forth, and to today creating work that speaks to today's world. So those are some of the great things when I think about my art in the process of this evolution.
Who are some of those people who are behind each of your weavings and creating the materials that help you make these pieces?
First is the greater being. With not the greater being, I wouldn't have any of that material. And since the greater being creates nature, second will be nature. I know that's not a person, but to me, that's divine energy. And so these are the two things that allows for my practice to exist. And then from there, the human that then are involved into it are first the farmers, the indigo farmers, cochineal farmers, and then my wife, kids, siblings that are also part of the harvesting process, the actual transforming the material into a weaving form. Spinners, other communities that also conforms in this process. Traditionally, it has been like that. This is not an environment where material could be ordered online, or it could be gotten from someone or in the local mercado per se. In a professional art practice, you need enough material, and so these are different people, communities that are around my studio and the practice, and makes one piece possible.
I'm wondering, do you feel connected to Black Mountain College at all? And if so, how?
Well, I actually discovered Black Mountain College not so long ago, but I discovered the work that Joseph Albers, Anni Albers, which is some of the iconic creative souls that my understanding of that has engaged with Black Mountain College. And I think they're and also their work that they've done in Bauhaus and so forth. And I've learned about their work many years ago when I began to bring that sensibility of the forms, of the color, and the abstract, and the deep meaningful of the symbolism. I came to understand that they were, and so many other artists were looking at the work that I was looking at, and the work that my ancestors have done. And so I don't have a lot of connections with this institution up until now through the exhibition that it's on view now. And so what I do with the connection, I feel like they have with my ancestors and with my work and with the remnants and what it's alive tradition that's alive today, Zapotec culture. It is obviously connects me to them because so it is this wonderful understanding for me. It was wonderful to understand how information travels, but also how by sharing the information, in this case from this context, it allows also the culture to be seen on this platform. And so I'm connected, and we're connected in some ways through looking at the same place, through admiring and understanding, and being drawn by these forms and looking at the same place as that is, I think, the connections that we have.
definitely. And it seems like there's this architectural element in a lot of your work that seems related to Bauhaus tradition and was appreciated by Bauhaus tradition as well, where Anni and Joseph Albers began their work or took part as well. So I'm wondering about the butterfly form in particular and what the origin of that is and why you've chosen to work with it.
So the origin of the butterfly itself, or at least in our culture, I would just say that in our culture, butterfly has hold in such a deep meaning and spiritual meaning. And the design itself has been used in our weavings for, I don't know how long, if not hundreds or maybe thousands. Because I also have to recognize, some of the evolvement of tradition. And so I am not aware when the community began to use butterflies within our work, but I could tell you the importance of it is that in our culture, we believe when someone passes, the soul then turns into a butterfly and starts a journey from earthly world, underworld, into the spirit world. And the spirit comes back to visit us to celebrate harvesting season, which today known as Day of the Dead. And so the symbolism of the butterfly has been there. The use of these elements or the reference of the butterflies itself, I can see in the present day even the prominence of the butterfly. And so for me was I discover the opportunity I discover, or through this trying to reclaim my right of imagination and bring my sense to a sensibility to be able to engage with the one element and be able to in some way take it apart and put it back together, in some way move it around and continue to play with the geometric design has allowed me to develop these deep relationship with the butterflies. And basically the butterflies, it's two triangles that comes together, and right in the center there's two lines that comes out, and at the end of each line there's a what I refer to as a sacred seed, as one seed. And so those are some of the elements that has expanded within my work. First, it's just an aesthetic form, trying to understand, and just putting my attention there beyond the symbolism of it. And then later in life, I then started to engage a much more deeper conversation into be able to capture or take note on current issues of the indigenous people, and that's the question about migration and borders. Diaspora series was then born, and engage in a conversation to what's our what is the answer, what is the conversation could lead to when a Native American is asking to why am I known as an immigrant today? And if the butterflies, notion of the butterflies, this journey, the spiritual journey, but also I started to think a lot about the monarch butterflies and how they have to migrate in order to save their species. And so how many generations it takes from them to be able to create that journey, starting from northern United States into Canada, spending the winter in Mexico, and then makes the journey back up. That is just to solely save their species. And through their journey, they're obviously threatened by human and climate, but also there's this notion of going back home. Well, what is home? That question is, what is home to the indigenous people? And if the land has been removed, if we have been removed for the land, and we're now known as an alien immigrant. And so we now start to deal with borders, but through understanding, especially engaging with the monarch butterfly's journey, the border becomes obsolete. Just like we didn't have borders before, and we've always had the right of passage throughout the Americas. And so, and those are the work that I have been doing, my approach to the butterflies.
I love that. Thank you. So I'm wondering what the day-to-day process has been like in your studio, and what kind of weaving equipment you're using, what kind of spinning equipment you're using, what is your loom like, what is your dye studio like?
Day to day is really depending of what the project, what is it that I'm working on. I'll just say right now, today I'm going to start in a piece. It's a series of work that I have been doing that's called Unseen, and these images or these pieces are actually these are I'm weaving through a metal structure that it's a wheel. And so so I've had selected the yarn. The yarn was dyed previously with different shades of cochineal insect. And so today I am going to go and look at the site, because the engineer has been installing the metal structure since this morning. And so I'm gonna see if he's done, and so that way I could start to plan on to weaving the piece. What it's and so yeah, really. So whatever is it that I'm working on, whatever the project might be, and so I also work in other projects, expanding on the diaspora series and continuous line series. Yesterday I was doing some drawing and working at the dimension. I start with the simple drawing, as I mentioned earlier. The studio here in Ventura, California, or in Oaxaca. In Oaxaca, where the majority of my production happens, and so that's where the season it's been welcomed by how much dye stuff it's needed. And that's been harvesting the indigo farmers. This is around the time that their harvest is ready, and so I'll be engaging with them, either visiting them, or they normally would just give us a call once those dye stuffs are ready. And so these different elements happen in a different times. So kind of everyone with what they're specialized on, the cochineal farmers. And so within the studio, there will be washing the material, there will be soaking, washing, or scouring, and also dyeing the different materials or the different colors that's needed for a specific project. And so also the support of, digitalizing the design, understanding the thread count, the size, the dimension, the type of thread that's going to be used for the piece itself. Is it going to be framed piece? Is it going to be felted? Much of my, or not much, but all my diaspora series, the designs are actually felted. They're not woven. And so, those are some of the processes that happen within my studio, and the different people that, supports that to make that possible.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I feel very inspired by this conversation. I think a lot of other people will too. It's been really great talking with you today. And I'm grateful that you've made time to meet with us. So thank you.
But no, thank you, Maya. I really appreciate for the opportunity to be able to come to together and be able to create a conversation I appreciate the opportunity, Jeff, and everyone that conforms your team and this wonderful institution to not only show us few pieces. I think there's so many great artists everywhere in the world, but to be able to celebrate with me and my culture as much of the inspiration historically has been driven through my culture, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity that it's now celebrated and uplifted to this celebration, and was not looked at as historical, right? Instead, just to celebrate, those of us who continue maintaining the integrity, but also communicating to today's audience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Porfirio.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.